Hello, everybody, and welcome to the 31st episode of Stories of Service, Ordinary People Who Do Extraordinary Work. I am the host of Stories of Service, Teresa Carpenter. And today, as I say, I always have an amazing guest, somebody who in this situation is near and dear to my heart, whose advice and help for many, many years ago got me on the path that I'm on now. And that is a relationship and love coach, Ivana Richey. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited.
I'm excited to talk to you. I love your posts, your videos, and so let me just tell the audience a little bit about you, and then I'm just going to dive into some questions. Ivana Richey is a global coach, mentor, speaker, trainer, influencer, and author. She specializes in helping women heal, step into their power, and manifest and keep soulmate love. She's especially known for her self-love healing journal, which has helped women all over the world deepen their relationship with themselves. She is the founder of Self-Carved, a successful movement created with the purpose to bring awareness to the power each woman possesses internally. She's a certified coach and holds a master's degree in organizational learning and leadership. And she and her husband, who is also her business partner, he appears in a lot of her work as well, have spoken to groups and audiences across various sectors all over the United States, including middle schools, where they inspire kindness to help root out the sources of bullying. Her story has inspired millions. She's been in major magazines, platforms, and news stories. She married her husband after only 55 days. So we're going to talk about that one, and continues to touch many lives through her social media posts, one-on-one sessions, and group retreats. Welcome.
Thank you so much. Thank you. It sounded really good when you read it.
Well, it is so good. And first off, I just kind of want to start off with what got you down the path of deciding that you wanted to be a relationship coach?
It's a great question. I didn't see a lot of healthy relationships growing up at all. There was a lot of dysfunction around me, and I I can only say that I wished I would have been more observant of how I allowed that to infiltrate me and the energy around me, but it did. So I had a lot of experience of witnessing people not having healthy relationships. So when I got with my husband, that was the first thing we talked about. My husband grew up in the ghetto, in the hood, and he saw a lot of violence, a lot of divorces, no healthy relationships either. So we just got
Wow.
together and we said, well, let's like start a new movement where we show that marriage can actually be something different, where you collaborate, where you thrive, where you impact people's lives. And it's not this thing where, oh, they got married and it's just getting worse and worse and worse and worse. Now, with time and with the work that we were doing, we realized that the major problem that couples struggled with was the relationship they had with themselves. So that's when we kind of started branching off to doing a little more than just the romantic relationship, and we got more into the healing and the self-love part, as well as the bullying part, because we were suggesting to one of the schools in Oklahoma to speak on negative self-talk. That was one of my biggest struggles. And he was like, that's great. And maybe we can start purchasing your books, but I would love for you to speak on bullying. And we were like, yes, let's do that. I was bullied growing up. My husband had one incident and he experienced it as well, like around him. So that's when everything kind of started branching off to other relationships as well. And like you had mentioned to me before we kicked this off, even in leadership, that's what I noticed. Obviously, I studied organizational learning and leadership, and I saw with a lot of leaders when I was first in corporate how you could tell by the way that they were coming off, how they were communicating, and the way that they were leading that they did not feel very good about themselves. So I just we both realized that it's all about relationships, a relationship with you, with your kids, with your romantic partner, with your peers, with your teachers, with everyone, with your managers. Everybody is affected by by relationships.
By relationships and your past hurts and your
Yes,
past traumas.
absolutely.
And when you don't address them, I think that they manifest themselves into work. And so you can't really figure out your purpose until you get to the root of why you're still having difficulties in your relationships. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think a lot of us, we use work as a distraction. It's an addiction that we don't talk about enough. Like growing up, a lot of us experienced emotional neglect because we didn't have the level
I
of
think we
presence.
lost you. Oh
Oh,
no.
No, no, no. Am I back? Hello, hello, hello. Hello.
No. Let me get rid of this one. Can
I
you hear
see
me?
this one.
All right. So you let's
It's freezing up a little bit still. Do I need to check in and out?
no, nope. I think the connection, to be honest with you, and I may just connect to my phone as an alternate Wi-Fi. But go ahead. Let's time. So you were saying that work being the addiction sometimes instead of
Mhm.
the
Go.
relationships.
Yeah, can you? Oh, you can hear me, right? So what I was mentioning
Yeah,
is
Joseph and you guys. Let me get on my guys. Give me 1 minute.
I have all three bars on my end. So
Yeah, yeah. I think it's, to be quite frank, I think it is on my end. We were trying to fix it on this morning. So these things happen. It's no big
yeah,
deal. And
part of it.
yeah, this isn't my stuff. So let me get on here. Okay. So I think I now, can you see me?
Yes, I can see you.
All right.
And
Awesome. Let's just keep going.
okay.
Saying the thing about work.
Yes, so you had brought up the trauma, and I was mentioning a lot of us we experienced emotional neglect, and we didn't have like pure presence from our caregivers, our parents. So what happened for some of us too was that we did receive some type of presence, but it was based on productivity, right? When we do
Mhm.
something. So this is what I call a performance-based household, where we only feel like we're worthy of love when we achieve something. And with my personal experience and a lot of my clients and just seeing what's happening in the world, I know this is kind of what we take with us into adulthood. We're like, oh, the higher that I climb the corporate ladder, or the more clients that I sign, or the more money that I make,
Mhm.
the
Oh
more
yeah.
worthy I am. So when you were mentioning that it stems from trauma, that's definitely a big piece, because a lot of us constantly feel like we need to prove ourselves. And that's where like imposter syndrome kicks in, and us constantly never feeling good enough no matter what we
Yeah,
accomplish.
absolutely. Oh yeah, for sure. And I can tell, I mean, not just in my work, I see that even in with my friends. And the one thing I do love is that there's finally a national conversation about imposter syndrome, uh, anxiety, and anxious attachment. And I know you've been doing a lot of posts lately about
Yes.
attachment and avoidant attachment, and that helped me a lot when I was going through my healing. Was learning about a bit about that.
Yes. Can you hear me? Okay.
Yes.
Yes. So it's funny. Many times in my work, things come up to me. It's kind of like I channel it, and I
Mhm.
just start talking about it, and then I look up the research behind it. I'm like, huh, okay, super cool. So I kind of have this like beautiful thing of, and I always like to back things up with science. That's really cool. But for me, growing up, I obviously by now I realized that I had avoidance attachment.
Mhm.
Many people asked me what kind of relationships I was in before my husband, and I'd like to say the longest one was 6 months long. And then you could say, oh, they were idiots and all this stuff, but at the end of the day, like what made me not want to continue to try, or at least make it successful, like why was it only 6 months? And for my husband, on the other hand, he was in longer relationships. His sister once told him, like, you've never been a bachelor. So actually, the time that he started spending single was before
Mhm.
we met. So luckily, he had that period of time of really connecting with himself and doing a lot of healing work. So it's
Mhm.
interesting how our childhood wounds and our childhood traumas manifest in these different attachment styles, where we are either avoiding love because growing up we were neglected so much. So we we see that as like a high risk thing. We're afraid of getting too close because we remember what it feels like to not have our needs met. And for a person with anxious attachment, they had, a little bit more of chaos, and they have the mother wound, and they walked on eggshells, and now they're trying to please everybody. So they stay in relationships longer. They make it so it's not a big deal. We can work this out, right? Because they have this embedded into them, versus a person with the avoidance style, they taught themselves to meet their own needs in however way they could. And they become very kind of self-sufficient. And these are the people who, ghost and are emotionally unavailable, and they have a wall up, and that a lot of people label as, a bad person.
Right,
So,
right. And I think that once you kind of understand the attachment style that you are, I think that it opens up a really big door for you, because then you can start to go, oh, I act this way because I, I tend to just see people as this thing that I have to have, or I'm threatened by getting too close to people, because then they're going to see me for how I am. Would you say that's correct?
absolutely, absolutely. A big thing for me, and I don't know if it was for you and for the people listening, it was like, will I be accepted if they see the full true me? And
Hmm.
although it seemed cool because people said, "Oh, you're like a riddle, you're very mysterious. I feel like I can't rip that wall down," and it sounded cute and things like that, but where was that coming from? It was me growing up feeling like when I showed the full me, when I was bringing out my side, when I was saying what I wanted to say, it was not always accepted. So now I'm trying to navigate these relationships by suppressing parts of me because I'm really afraid of not being accepted deep down, which is why I think self acceptance is really the key component in your relationship with yourself starting off.
Is that the biggest thing? You've been doing this for quite a while. You've been at this business. I remember you were part of this when I was going into my healing back in 2016, I think, 15, 16-ish. And I want to know, like, what do you think it's the self acceptance is the biggest problem that you see when you're coaching clients?
I think the self acceptance, the constant validation for love and attention, and being able to give it to yourself. But what I will always say is, if you're not healing your trauma, if you're not present with your wounds, if you're not willing to feel your emotions, including your anxiety and everything that comes up, if you're not willing to go through that process, then there is no way you're going to accept yourself, and that you're going to love yourself. So I think those two components are crucial. Breaking those energetic and emotional patterns that you have where you feel a certain type of way about yourself, and that's also what you put out to the universe, and you continue to attract people to kind of validate that. I believe a lot of women, they stay in toxic relationships and they continue to attract the toxic type. I'm just using that word because a lot of
Right.
people are familiar with it. Because they are reaffirming their initial identity, right? A lot of women say that they want something else, but they're not willing, and men too, they're not willing to transform themselves to become a completely new person. And that's what happens with trauma. Trauma wants to keep you stuck in that old identity. And then you ask yourself, why can't I leave this relationship? Why can't I leave this job? Why can't I do something different? But because you're still holding on to that identity, and you have a certain support system in your life they constantly continue to reaffirm this, because you're talking to them about it, you're complaining about it. Oh, poor you. Oh yeah, that person is an idiot. Oh yeah, I feel so sorry for you. And then you get some type of connection. So a lot of people will settle for that connection rather than to go through like the phase of healing and releasing, and to really go through that pain to see who's really going to be here. And it's a scary thing because we ask ourselves, if I heal from this, who's going to be there?
Man, that's profound. You're absolutely right. I never thought about the validation and the support you get around you when you're in your trauma and you're in your wounds, and what how hard that is to let go of that, because that's all you know. I'm going to get to Joe's question, and then I have a question about how you broke the cycle with your husband. But
Absolutely.
yeah, Joe is asking. Let me pull it up real quick. He says, "Here, hold on. Let me hit." He says, one interesting question, and I had to open my screen to try to get some of the questions out. But basically, is are you getting this from your parents? So, do you think that you're trying to basically, is there something that happened in your childhood and the love and the support that you didn't get from your parents, and that's why you choose the partners that you do and kind of make the mistakes that you make?
That's definitely an interesting question. It's actually one of my favorite questions. It's not so much that we get what we didn't get from our parents, but that's the chase. That's the constant chase. I want that whether it's conscious or not. So that is the trauma attraction that I like to call it. So what was missing in your childhood? And then your mission becomes, how can I try to chase that and get that from another human being? And we also think, not consciously, that, well, maybe it's too late for my dad or my mom to change, but this individual, maybe they can,
Mm.
maybe I can groom them, right? And for example, if you identify as an empath, you won't ever admit that you're doing this, but oftentimes the empath is really wounded too, and the empath has more patience, and the empath is willing to do more things, but at the end of the day, the empath wants something back in return too. The narcissist is just more blunt when we talk about those two extremes. So we're chasing what we didn't get from our parents, but because we're chasing it and because there is a wound there, because we haven't not filled it, but felt it ourselves, we're not here to fill voids, but really be with them and feel them, then we continue to attract people who will never give us that. And then we can, again, going back to the identity and the belief that I'm not good enough continues to be reaffirmed. Oh, it's true. It's true. When my parents said or how they treated me, look, it's everywhere else in the universe. It's everywhere else in the world. Everybody's treating me like that too, because you're looking for
Mm.
that and then you never find it.
So once you felt those feelings, because I did that, after my last breakup, and that's when I met you through that group. And then when I met my husband, I did that. I felt those really, really intense feelings. And I've always wondered like how I broke the cycle with my husband. And I really do believe it's just because I gave a different type of man a chance. But I still to this day, it's like I wonder like how I was able to move past that because I stayed in that victim mindset where I kept trying to change the men I was going out with, men that didn't want a commitment, didn't want to really have anything long term, just thought I was someone to have fun with, and I didn't have a lot of boundaries, and so I allowed those things to happen over and over and over again. And so I'm curious in your case, when you met your husband and he had his hurts as well, how did you and you had all this trauma growing up, what was different and what made you say, okay, I'm gonna try something different this time?
It's a great question. I had made a decision before I met my husband.
Okay.
And people underestimate their power. Like I get chills saying this because people look at trauma as something that's going to keep them trapped their entire life. I have clients I've worked with for a week, two, up to a month, and they tell me, hey, this has helped me more than a year of therapy. I've been to therapy 20 years, but now I feel completely different just during this period that we work together because people are not taught or people are not taught to realize their own power. So I started seeing my pattern of this is what I'm looking for. I am constantly selling myself short. I am not really going after what I want. I am so desperate to receive love. Like my entire college career was like chasing love, and I didn't even want to admit that to myself. So when I saw that, when I admitted it, when I took ownership for my part that I had played in past relationships, which a lot of people are not willing to do, that's what we have to do to break the cycle. I made the decision moving forward, I'm going to start opening up more because I was the avoidant person. I was the person with the wall up. I'm going to start opening up more. I am willing to do whatever it takes on my
Mhm.
end. And it wasn't something that I was saying as an affirmation every day, but I made the decision. And I think decision, like the word decision, is one of the most powerful words. So when I met my husband and we went out on our first date, immediately wanted to break down my wall, and it was so uncomfortable, but I was with it. I was with my emotions in that moment. Oh my gosh, this is scary. I don't really want to say this. Is he going to judge me? And all that was coming up, but I continue to be with it. I continue to be with it,
Wow.
continue to share. So I would say the decision that I made.
You made a choice. Yeah.
Mhm.
And that's so key is that it is a choice. It really is a choice, and I think people think that they don't have a choice, and I made a choice to erect boundaries. I didn't have boundaries. When I met my husband, I didn't do the same things I used to do. Like, I didn't just constantly contact him even though he was, maybe busy or whatever. I would intentionally wait until he would contact me, and it would always, like, work. Like he would be thinking about me or miss me. And then we would have this healthy back and forth that I just never had before, when I was just constantly,
Mhm.
basically just overwhelming somebody with me. And so, but I knew, like, if I never erected boundaries, I was never going to meet a healthy partner, because I just I didn't have them within myself. And so I can relate to that. I never thought about that, how it really was this choice, even when I met him, that changed everything. We did have a comment here from my friend Marcus, and you could probably relate to this. I'll read it and I'll put it on the screen. Self-awareness is such a hard road to navigate in today's society, especially for Black men. It seems easier to accept who you're expected to be. And I know you're married to a Black man, so I'm sure that you see some of that as well. Am I right?
Hmm. There's so much to say about that. We're both doing a lot of work, really looking into ancient civilizations and how slavery has affected the way that Black families operate, and how Blacks view themselves and how they treat themselves. And um, fear is such a controlling component still, and how the Black man is looked upon as a deadbeat, and they'll not be the father that shows up. But this has been beaten down through generations. We have 14 generations of trauma stored in our DNA. So knowing that fathers were just there, like the muscular dads, they were there to birth the kids, and then the kids were sold off to slavery, and they were just left on their own. Like, this is still stored in your DNA. So really awakening, and not being put in the box of that this is who you are, like really going, I think, breaking free from the rigid beliefs of society and people who people tell you that you are, and really be willing to dive into spirituality and tap into who you are, and to be with that when that comes up. Like, what kind of beliefs do you have about yourself? Who are people telling you that you are? What do you think that you have to do? Do you think that people look at you differently? And all that, allow that still to come, because that's trauma that's been passed down through generations. And people will say, oh, slavery doesn't exist anymore, but it's still alive in many ways, and has been beaten down into your DNA. Like, it literally has. Like, there are signs proving. They did this study at Harvard where it's really, really cool. 1 gram of DNA stores up to 700 terabytes of information. It's like really mind blowing.
Wow.
1 gram. So people saying, oh, you should not be bothered by that today. And Teresa, I know sometimes like we feel guilt or shame or something as women, and we're like, how can I feel this way? Like, why am I so mean to myself? But you don't know if that's an emotion or an experience that was passed down from your mom or your grandma. So this is why being with it is so crucial, but still not like drowning in it.
Or
But to be,
dwelling. That was gonna be my next question,
yeah,
is you feel the emotion, right? Because I did that. I had these, like, periods in my past when I was going through these breakups, or I was in this single period where I just had nobody and all my friends are married, or I'm in the middle of a military move and I'm not working a lot and I'm just obsessing over this issue. And I would have those just breakdown, beat down, like cry in the fetal position moments. And I was feeling everything. But how do you transition from I'm feeling to I'm obsessing and I'm dwelling?
that's a great question. I would say when you start adding stories to it.
Mm. So when you basically find a way to explain why you're feeling what you're feeling, where it's coming from, and then then I believe, right, Ivana, it's still kind of a choice at that point to
Yes,
say,
it is.
okay, I felt this, I've grieved for it, I know why I'm doing it, and now I have to move on.
Yes. So a great way to explain that, when you're just feeling you're in your body, but when you start thinking and creating stories, you leave your body and go into your head. And that's when the additional anxiety comes. So a lot of people create so much chaos for themselves when they leave their body. Emotions, they cannot stay forever. I don't remember how long, how many seconds, or if it's like a minute or something. It's not very long. So if you really feel it and you don't leave your body to go into your head, it's going to dissipate, it's going to transcend into something else. Or
Mm.
you'll just notice, I feel a little calmer now. And then you say, okay, what do I want to do next? Do I want to just sit here and rest? Do I want to take a bath? Do I want to go and work out? A lot of people, they replace the feeling part with things that we're taught are self-care. Oh, working out is great because it releases dopamine, and then they don't ever feel their emotions. And a lot of people have these great looking bodies, but they still struggle with their mental health because they don't take care of that piece first. So always being with it first, but then not creating additional stories and then moving into something more productive. And that's what I always say. That's what I did with my self-love healing journal. It came from a place of pain. I was with it. And then I was paying attention to what was going on. And then that just came through me. Okay, let me create something. And then I transcended my pain into creation. And pain is such a beautiful thing. And if we didn't have pain, there's so much that wouldn't be created, but people look
Right.
at it as the enemy. So.
Like all the songs in life, and so is the art, and so much of what comes from, like, my blog. I wrote my blog from a place of pain. From 2014, I was, abusing alcohol, and there was other things going on, and that was where I started writing. And Joseph Benton, he says here, my biggest struggle comes from not even being self-aware. As a military person, we're indoctrinated into setting your feelings and thoughts aside. What would you say are some of the good practices for self-awareness?
Spending time with yourself, actually getting to know you. So if
Mhm.
you're constantly, running around and keeping yourself busy and just working and not taking the time for you, I would say that's the greatest thing, because you want to learn about you. You want to learn about yourself. And to spend time with yourself is the greatest gift you can give to yourself, but it's a scary place to go to for a lot of people because a lot of emotions will come up. So I definitely
Mhm.
encourage people. My husband is a part of something called MVP. It stands for Emerging Vets and Professional ex-players, professional players, and they come together, and it's like a beautiful support group, and it's great peer to peer. But what happens is, and my husband has shared this, many times it's like you just continue to talk about your feelings and activate that trauma in your body, right?
Mhm.
So we have to, and this is why I'm talking about feeling your emotions. Some of the good techniques to do is to like look up exercises for releasing trauma. Somatic therapy is great. Anything that has to do with the body, working with your body, shaking it out, right? So when animals go through something traumatic, they shake it off, right? They shake
Mhm.
it off and they move on. But we as humans, we kind of like curl up and we sit with it. So shaking out your body on a regular basis, dancing, activating your body as much as possible to get those excess emotions out is crucial. But spending time with yourself will help you be more self-aware, because you start seeing what's going on, and then you can start navigate yourself through it. And what you feel like you cannot navigate through, you get support with. So spend time
Wow.
with yourself.
No, I love that. I love that. And then how, when you're in the process of, getting that additional validation from those people that are feeding your trauma, how do you learn how to be around healthy people? That was also an issue for me, because I'd be around what I could call like the normal friends, and they all seemed like they were happy and they had great lives. And I was just like, I could never be like them. I mean, I just thought it was unattainable. So how do you, when you have such low self-esteem and self-worth, how do you change your peer group and your support group to be around people that are more healthier, and those things?
For example, being a part of something like this, and then adding a person afterwards, signing up for something free, paying for a course that actually has other people in it. Uh,
Mhm.
Let me see. in in investing in, for example, in a coach, and then that coach connects you with people in her world or his world. Let me see, changing, the more that you shed, the more that you heal, the more you're going to notice that, hey, my peace and my time with myself, like I was suggesting to Joseph, is more fun, is more valuable than the time that I spend with that person. And then people start falling off. You change your energy, you change your vibration, and then you start naturally attracting other people. You could be going to the grocery store and you meet someone there. It's kind of like this whole love manifestation thing. You really don't know where people are going to come from, but what you're in charge of is making sure that you're growing, that you're healing, that you're advancing, and then trusting that on that path you're going to be taken care of, right? But
I
if
love
you're
it.
fearful, then you're going to continue to
Yeah, you have to
be
seek out those people that are in that same healing space as you. And so, and with the internet, and again, this kind of gets into what Marcus just said here. He wants to know more information about the MVP.
I'd be happy to share that. Absolutely. It's it's an amazing group. It's an amazing group. They come together every week. They do a quick workout to get that energy out. Then they share. They're there for each other. It's like a brother and sister thing, and it's awesome. It's really
Is it
awesome.
a virtual thing that anyone can join, or is it in person?
It's in person. They have different chapters throughout the country, though. So
Oh,
I don't
wow.
know exactly how many they have, but they're growing tremendously. They have 2 chapters in Texas already. So, and then sometimes sometimes they do virtual sessions, and I don't know if they're going to move more to that as well. But they definitely have different chapters. I don't know where they
Okay.
all are, but yeah.
Well, Marcus, I will put all of Ivana's links in the show notes after this. I usually do that after the fact, just because sometimes when you post a link with a picture, it doesn't get as much reach. So after the show, I'll make sure to have all her links, and it'll include one to that as well. So,
Hey, also,
oh, go ahead. Sorry.
I just wanted to piggyback of what you were mentioning, because we were talking a little bit about the generational trauma and the DNA, and you were mentioning how your boundaries was a big thing for you. And I just want to call it out that what you really did was you changed your own boundaries, right? A lot of people think boundaries is what we tell other people, but no, it's what happens internally. And when you chose to spend time with yourself and be with that instead of texting your husband,
right, constantly,
what you used to do, what you're doing is you're reprogramming your DNA, right? So you ask yourself, how did I break that cycle? But I did something that I didn't do before, and I did it consistently.
I did.
I remember one of the greatest tips my husband once gave me when I was still like a little bit too much of an overworker. Like I still have the tendency to just want to work. Like it's so natural to me. He told me, I said something, and I think like I was feeling a little anxious. He was like, leave the phone and go to the bathroom without your phone. Most people go to the bathroom and they're on their phone. And so I started using it with a lot of my clients, and they were expressing how challenging it was for them to just leave their phone while they went to the bathroom. That's how much we're leaving our body and constantly, or we're looking for some type of stimulation not to feel. So just small things like that. And if anybody who is struggling to be with themselves, like what is it that you're doing every day to distract yourself, and start like decreasing the level of engagement that you have going on with that. And then slowly but surely, you're going to stop completely.
No, I love it, Ivana. I think having that white space is so important too. John McCaskill, he's a Navy SEAL and he's a mindfulness coach, and he's on LinkedIn, and he did a post this week. It was great. It was literally a post with like a white space. And he basically, his whole point was boring is good. And when you're bored, you're creative. When, allow yourself to be bored, allow yourself to just do nothing sometimes, because that's sometimes where the greatest ideas come. It's where you can clear your mind and allow yourself to be fully present, instead of, like you said, constantly scrolling through your phone or checking social media. Because I'm very guilty of that. It's something that I constantly have to work on, because it's so easy to want to just see what people are doing, or want to check in with people, but it's really good to take that time and be with yourself, and practice that mindfulness and that presence in the moment. Even if it's a boring moment, that's okay. Right.
Mm-hmm. And I even have like a different way of viewing that today, because growing up, whenever I didn't do something, I said that I was bored, right? But it was really like I felt uncomfortable. So with people who tell me, oh, that's boring, okay, well, you're not comfortable with feeling. Because if you're comfortable with feeling, and if you're comfortable being with yourself and you enjoy your own company, then being just in this white space will never be boring.
Wow, you're right. Because if you're comfortable and you're happy, you can always find something to think about, something to put your mind on. And yeah, Catherine Brown, I miss that nothing. It's such a struggle with 2 toddlers, I bet.
Mhm.
Yes. It's definitely hard. That's a great question though, Ivana. How do people carve out that time to have the nothingness, and when they have busy families and stressful jobs and all those kinds of things? What do you advise your clients when it comes to that?
So discipline to it, and they're just being really fully devoted to their own relationship with themselves. If it's busy from 7 in the morning to whenever, you got to get up at 5. Just got to do it. So you got to find time, because we prioritize what we want to prioritize. And oftentimes our relationship with ourselves is put on the back burner. I grew up, my mom was my best friend, and she is still to this day. But in the way that she hurt me and that I've shared with her today, is that I felt how she was feeling, and that she always put herself on the back burner. So if she would have prioritized herself more, then I would have felt better seeing that she was happy. So there's never an excuse for a mother not to care for herself, because it has such an impact on her children.
Oh, that's fascinating. It's kind of like at work when you see your boss just working nonstop till 7 p.m. or whatever, or you just see this person just never stopping, always looking at emails, off work hours, and it puts everybody else nervous. And then you see the boss not prioritizing him or herself and giving themselves time. So it doesn't give their people permission to have time for themselves. So it's
And that goes back to what we talked about. What did you see your mom do? What do you feel guilty about? What are you thinking when you have, because you could be avoiding it because you don't want to look or seem like you're a failure or you're unproductive or whatever your trauma and your conditioning is telling you. So that's why, again, breaking it little by little is so crucial.
Right. And Marcus, yeah, boredom is scary for me because it leaves me with my thoughts, and my thoughts hurt, and that's what I want to change. And it's very, very hard. And that's why people numb. I mean, that's why I numbed with alcohol. I numbed with accomplishments at work, because it's like you're kind of hustling to feel worthy, or to feel a part of the group. I would drink in group settings so that I wouldn't feel uncomfortable, because I wasn't comfortable just being myself. And so I thought I had to be drunk in order to be accepted. And people around you, especially in the military, they reinforce that, because they tell you how fun you are while you're drinking. And then you're like, oh, okay, this is the way I get friends, and this is the way people like me and accept me. And nothing could be further from the truth. And you learn that at least I learned that as I got older, is that those kinds of encounters were pretty shallow, and they didn't really lead to the kind of friendships that I have today, and the bonds with people who are productive. And I love what you said about the support groups. Tell me a little bit about some of the groups that you have and some of the services that you offer.
So I have a group, it's called Self-Carved. It's right now we're talking a lot about attracting love and creating a thriving relationship with the person you attract. But everything that I talk about is really at the core about healing in your relationship with yourself. That one is for women, but everywhere else on social media, you can connect with me. It's Ivana Richey everywhere on social media. I have a podcast. It's called Self-Carved that you can subscribe to. I do different things. I have like different periods in my life where I talk more about one thing than the other. So Self-Carved and Ivana Richey, all across social media.
How is it doing the bullying stuff, the bullying talks and things like that?
The bullying it's really unique because we approach it from a different perspective. I don't believe in punishment in terms of healing and then behavioral change. And even though I was bullied myself, I'm not like, oh, bullies are this and they need to be punished. I look at it from a perspective of healing and self-love, meaning if that person who bullied, that bully, if they had a healthy home environment and they weren't bullied and they didn't experience the abuse, they would never do that. So bringing the self-love piece to the bullying awareness is really big for us because we want to help both. We know that this person hurt the other person more, but if this person wasn't hurt and they were not hurt by someone else, they wouldn't do it. So I think it's a lot of fun to talk about it. This is how we break the generational stuff. And then these kids change their bullying behaviors and then they pass down something else to their kids. So we look at it from a perspective of how can we help both? How can we help both? And how can we empower the person being bullied to, and everybody else around, to be able to read some of the body language of the person being bullied, how to know that they are needing help, or how to know what to say or what to do, how the person being bullied can talk back to the bully so they don't continue and things like that. So we go into energy and body language and things like that too.
Oh, I love it.
Fun. But it's so important to have someone. I felt like my mom really saved me. Luckily, I felt comfortable enough to share it with her, and she approached those people. And I always think to myself, what if I wouldn't have shared it with my mom? Where would I have gone down? Like, what kind of road would I have gone down? So, yeah, the support
Oh,
system.
wow. And that's early on. What normally happens is that you might grow up with a traumatic childhood with your mom and dad, and then it just bleeds over to school and having those issues when you're in school. And then you get to the adulthood and you have all these past traumas and hurts that you just haven't worked through. But then, like you said, a lot of people, and I know I was in this camp, I just didn't know how to find those other people that had been through these same kinds of things. And it wasn't until I got into the support group environment. Like we had me and my friend Molly started that relationship support group. I started being around other people that had those same kind of hurts. And then even in the anonymous communities that I started joining, I was like, it opened up a whole new world for me, because all of a sudden I realized that there were all these other people that had those same hurts, had those same issues, those same traumas. And it really made me understand that everybody has some level of hurt, some level of trauma. There isn't anybody that goes through life. I mean, even like my friends that I used to look at and say, oh my God, they had a perfect childhood, a perfect life. I can now look back and go, no, they didn't. They had things, they had their own struggles too. And I was so locked into my own trauma that I just failed to recognize it. And so that has been so powerful for me to realize that. I have a whole article coming out next month in Warhorse where that was really my big realization, was that everyone has trauma. And when you see things from that lens, then you go, oh, you can have some empathy, even for the people that might not be treating you with kindness, because you understand that somebody hurt them as well. Would you agree?
Absolutely. And I think you answered the question that you brought up. You said, how do we find the right support group, or how do I know that other people been through this too? Like, you started it, right? By you starting this, you get other people to step up. So you could have all these people around that you're not even aware of that they're going through these things, but you be the voice. You be the one who leads herself. You take that action and people will follow and they'll start sharing things. You're like, oh, wow. And you
Yeah.
realize you're not alone. So if anybody's in the place of feeling like they're alone, really speaking their truth and expressing their truth will change things, not only for you, but for the people around you. My husband threw me into jail facilities and boys and girls group homes and halfway houses. That's where I really broke free and through my voice, because I had suppressed so much growing up, and that helped me heal a lot. And that's something that's really, really big for me.
Wow, it sounds like you and your husband like challenge each other, and you're like, that's like the best relationship to have. Wow. To
Yes.
have somebody that can hold you accountable and put you in situations that you might not feel comfortable in. Um,
Yes.
we did have another question from Marcus. He says, what is your opinion on how someone should deal with guilt?
It's a great question. I think we all struggle with it from time to time. Picking back on his other comment about the thoughts, a lot of us believe that we are our thoughts, and this is why we're so scared of them. And the more scared we are of them, the more intensely they come. Your thoughts are not a problem. Once you become the observer and you can let anything come through you, but you don't act upon it, or you don't make a story up about it, or you don't create a new belief from it, you can sit with yourself and hear all these things in your head without identifying with them. So you cannot identify with your thoughts, which leads me over to the guilt part. Your guilt is coming from a story that you have created about something that you did in the past, right?
Mhm.
So I almost made a decision, or I made this choice and I should have done something else. So then today in the present, you are creating a story about something that you cannot change, right? You're like shitting on yourself, and you can
Right.
change something that you did. So looking at it from the perspective of the fact that I have the ability to feel guilty is huge, because that means that there is like a level of humanness in me. And then one thing that I'm doing today, whenever I get these things to come up that my husband shared with me, is not playing with it. That's number one, which I have started calling not entertaining it. When something comes up, when a thought comes up, instead of just letting it come and pass, we start playing around with it, and our ego loves
Mm.
that, and then can continue to create problems. So not entertaining it, and then also reaffirming ourselves, and saying to ourselves, what I did in the past was the best thing that I did based on my circumstances and who I was back then. And can I forgive that person? Can I let him or her free? Can I really forgive them? So those two components have helped me a lot. Not with three, not identifying with my thoughts, not entertaining my thoughts and creating more stories. And then we start going back and forth in our head. And then finally forgiving the version of ourselves that chose to do that. Because back then you thought it was the best thing to do. And you can never change that, but you can forgive that version of yourself. And then you free yourself into now.
Yeah. Wow. You really can. And it is definitely it takes a level of self-discipline to get to that point where you do that. And that's where you really do need those people to bounce those thoughts off of. Like Vicky Lynn Hindreth said, it's breaking that cycle
Yes.
from your past. And she had a question here. Let me pull it up. I'll read it, then pull it up. How does one coexist in a relationship with an over analytical person when you're not the one?
That's
Great question.
That's a great question. So how does one coexist? First, the biggest thing is understanding that a relationship exists within you. Okay. So what are you creating inside of your head about that person, about your partner, about that person? What are you saying to yourself? That's huge. You coexist by being present and not making up stories about that other person. I overanalyze things still, like that's like my residue, my trauma. I'm very
I do too.
analytical. And
Mhm.
my husband calls me out on it. He was like, it's not called for. And I'm like, okay. But he doesn't tell himself stories like, oh, she's so much. She never stops analyzing. She needs to stop doing this. That will change his view of me and his level of intimacy and presence with me. So being able to be present with a person and not making up stories or saying to yourself, oh, this means this or this means that. Like it's really your ability to connect with another person. And also seeing it as that's not who they are. That's just like their residue. This is just what they have accumulated. This is like their trauma response. This is how they got through life. Okay. How can I still show them love and compassion and be present with them? And hopefully, over time, with consistency, when I'm continuing to show my love, they'll calm down a little bit. But if they don't, like, what is the problem? The problem is the story that you tell yourself about that.
Right. It really is. I've learned to question a lot of my stories from my past and look back on them and see that maybe I didn't have the right perception of some of those issues and being able to reframe them. I even went home on a trip to Columbus, Ohio, and I went back to like my grade school and my high school, and I started just reimagining, like I wouldn't even say or remaking it up, but I started remembering all the good. And because I had played this like negative tape in my head for so many years about how painful these experiences were. And I decided when I went back this last trip, I was like, I'm just going to really, really focus on the fact that it wasn't all painful. There were some amazing experiences. I did have some good times at this grade school. I did have some good experiences at this high school. And I even took pictures of myself like in front of those buildings. And I just retold those stories about the good things because I wanted to, on balance, really kind of train my brain about, okay, there were some painful experiences, sure, but I can't dwell and live in that negativity all my life. I have to remember the good. And there were a lot of kids that were good to me. And there were a lot of friends I had that I did have good experiences with. And so I think that was my big takeaway by doing that and just being physically present in that area. So you're absolutely right. It is the stories we tell ourselves about our past. Gosh, I've enjoyed talking to you so much,
Me
Ivana.
too.
Is there anything I did not ask you or anything else that you kind of want to bring up when it comes to trauma, self-love, relationships, just the whole subject in general?
I would say that you're not your trauma, and that a lot of the things that we remember is really not like actual facts. And I'm saying this maybe to help like relieve some of the pressure that you're currently feeling. A lot of the things that we remember is not actual facts. So we're walking around every day thinking about something that we think happened a certain type of way. This is why sometimes when two people get together, they tell two completely different stories because of how trauma
Yep.
is stored, and it messes with our mind, right? Our mind wants to protect us. So we start telling stories. So when you know that a lot of it is not really actual facts, when you are present, when we talked about breathing, feeling your emotions, shaking it out, dancing it out, a lot of the stuff that you, Teresa, mentioned, you did too. And at the same time, when you start looking at what was good, you're releasing the emotional connection to your old stories.
I did. I did. I let it go. It was amazing.
That's amazing. People think that they have to talk about it or continue to think about it for it to to be released. But no, when you work with the body, the emotional connection to that story releases. So if you release the emotions attached to, okay, my friend did this to me, then you can think about that and you won't feel the same way in your body anymore. And that's really the key. We want to feel differently. And this is why you work with your body. So a lot of it a lot of the things you tell yourself is not really true. You're not your trauma. You're not your thoughts. It's safe to be with you, in you. And then also focus on the good in your life and without neglecting how you're feeling. So it's really this beautiful dance. And also like the day cannot exist without the night, and then there's up and there's down. So having this level of contrast is really helping you see who you be and to carve yourself into, right? It's all about carving yourself because you have that choice.
I love it. I love it. Love it. Love it. All right. I'm going to meet you backstage, go on full screen just for a second here. And all right, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. This has been another amazing conversation. I've learned so much, and gosh, it just put me in a great mood. And I hope it did the same for you. There is help. There is healing. We don't have to be our past. And it's just wonderful to know that. Next week, I will be having Stuart Scheller on the show. I cannot wait to talk to him. He made a decision that I'm not sure I would have made, but I admire him just the same. And I really look forward to having this conversation with him and talking about what the next steps are. So with that, you guys have a wonderful evening, and I'll talk to you all later. Bye now.